are so excited to be doing today's Facebook Live. Today is the third anniversary of the EFMP hearing that ultimately led to EFM being founded. We have really amassed a support group amongst our families of something that I didn't even think possible the day that I testified. And I think that every single one of you should be proud that not only are you a member of our community, but that you're helping support each other. Today, Jennifer and Rebecca had a great idea about going back through the hearing, hearing our stories, hearing the promises that were made by the military and legislators, and really talking about where we are, how far we've come, because this hearing happened right before COVID closed the world. So, a lot of the progress we were making came to a standstill. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Rebecca, Jennifer, you have anything before we jump in?
Sure. Yeah. I would like to say that I was watching this testimony 3 years ago, and it came at a critical point where I was actually getting ready to retire from the Air Force earlier than expected due to EFMP issues and being dual military. So the testimony really, really hit me hard when I saw you. And of course, as you know, I reached out to you, and the rest is history. But no, we know each other pretty well. But I was sobbing when I heard your testimony, and as I was sitting at my computer. And what amazed me was all the people that showed up. And Carrigg, another one of our staff members, was there in the audience, and I just wanted to share that because she did want to be here today to tell her story, but she couldn't. And she was so moved. She was the first person who couldn't get into the room, and they had to figure out what to do with the rest of those families. So I just wanted to share that you made an impact by sharing your story, and it made a lot of people feel like we weren't alone. Jennifer.
I'll add on to Carrigg that she saved up her respite hours. Like she's always said, she's like, I saved up my respite hours to attend the EFMP hearing. And so that way, I had those hours and I could go hear other people, hear it all. I actually had no idea that there was an EFMP hearing, had none of it. It wasn't even on my radar until after I joined EFM, which I think, so obviously I was late to the game, but I just remember watching it all, that first time and thinking like, just wow, like, we still have a long way to go. Because as you said, Austin, like you've said numerous times, there were suggestions, there were things that were promised. And, I guess today, having this live, I wanted to remind people like, we still have promises that need to be kept for our families. So.
Yeah, there were a lot of promises made. I can tell you, I actually met Carrigg that day, though I didn't remember it until she joined EFM. There were a lot of people. There were so many people, they did have to open a second viewing room. And I can tell you that the members of Congress were shocked. They were unprepared, which is why there was a scramble to find another place for people to be able to watch the hearing because all of the chairs were full. And even after that viewing room had been opened, people were still standing at the door hoping to get into the hearing. So it really was, I think, the first time I felt like I wasn't alone in this journey, right? All of these people showed up, and I know they weren't there to hear me, right? They were there because they're EFMP families and this program means something to them. And seeing all of these people who cared just as much as I did really proved to me that I wasn't alone. And as we all know, that can go a long way in our life. So we can jump in.
I would like to thank Chairman Spear, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the subcommittee for this opportunity to speak before you about the EFMP program. My husband has been active duty for 17 years and is now a first sergeant in the Old Guard. During his career, we've been through 5 PCS moves, and my husband has deployed and gone to training away from our family more times than I can count, often while our children were in crisis or in the hospital. It was at my husband's 4th duty station while on a compassionate reassignment for our son that we brought our daughter Melanie home. What should have been the most exciting time of our lives turned into a nightmare. Melanie was born with Down syndrome and a congenital heart defect that would lead to her hospitalization just 3 days after joining our family. We learned that in order to survive, she would need open heart surgery at 8 weeks old. The process to get her covered by TRICARE would be long and protracted, and to do so, we'd be forced to drive to the nearest Army Guard base to complete the paperwork, then wait for it to be processed. The process could not be expedited, and our daughter's surgery could not wait. As we met with the hospital's finance department, they explained that we needed to put down a 10% deposit to proceed with surgery, and the deposit was $100,000. Ultimately, the cost of saving my daughter's life was $1 million, and time was not on our side. Someone suggested we explore Medicaid as an option, and I'm thrilled to share with you today that thanks to Medicaid coverage, she had a successful open heart surgery. For any family, this alone would have been the most stressful event of their lives. However, it was while Melanie was in the hospital recovering that we were told my husband had 2 options. He could move our family for his upcoming PCS or voluntarily separate from the Army. He begged for an alternative, explaining that he deeply valued his military career and most certainly did not want to separate, but that our daughter simply could not be discharged so quickly after surgery. The response he received is seared in our memories. While sitting at her bedside in cardiac ICU, he received a phone call from Army Branch. The room was full of doctors and morning rounds, and my husband was told, maybe you can return that one and get a different one once you're there. In regards to our newly adopted daughter. The conversation happened on speakerphone, and the entire room went silent upon hearing those words. This is the moment we realized our family meant nothing to the military. We reached out to the gaining station's EFMP office only to be told there was nothing they could do. All of our children's needed services were available in the local area, and 3 weeks later, I was forced to discharge my daughter against doctor's advice because we didn't have the finances to support 2 households. Once we arrived, it became clear that although services were available in the area, the wait lists were over a year long for some specialties. Our first stop to the EFMP office was where I begged them for help. I remember explicitly asking, you said there was care, you know there's a 28-day standard. Where did you find the providers you did to bring our family here? The FMP provider replied, it's not our job to check or track wait lists. We just look at the TRICARE website to see if a provider is listed in taking new patients. It took us 2.5 years of fighting and 2.5 years of heartache and 2.5 years of constant stress and 2.5 years of delayed and inefficient care for our children before we were able to get out of there. In 2015, my husband was granted a compassionate reassignment to the Metro DC region. Here, my family has unequivocally received better medical care than anywhere my husband has ever been stationed in his career. But that means we access care across 3 states and the District of Columbia. The move from an education standpoint has been flat out dismal. In the 5 years since we arrived here, we've had to sue the local school district 3 times on behalf of our sons, and we are currently in the middle of a due process complaint on behalf of our daughter, as well as 2 federal complaints because she's been excluded from school for 2 years. Earlier, I mentioned my daughter had surgery covered by Medicaid, but that's not where her need for Medicaid ended. Despite having ECHO, which was supposed to be the military's answer for things not covered by TRICARE, Despite having ECHO, which was supposed to be the military's answer for families like mine needing Medicaid, we still rely heavily on it for things not covered by TRICARE, such as a continuous glucose monitor that alerts us to dangerously low blood sugar levels that can cause long-term neurological damage. Secretary of Defense Esper recently said, I understand well the sacrifices our service members and their families make to protect this great country. This is why I'm committed to taking care of families and ensuring they have the resources they need to thrive. One thing I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that your military members living with children on EFMP are far more resilient than those that are not. The skill set to remain calm under constant pressure while juggling life or death decisions, it is a skill we know the military needs and our families practice daily. I wish I could say that my family is alone in the things that we've experienced and the opportunities that we've lost, but I've spent the last 7 years advocating for families like mine, and I'd implore you to read my written testimony about Willow, whose father was stationed at an installation without a required neurosurgeon and has suffered loss of vision in one eye because of it. About the Olsen family, who's dual military and has been forced to initiate the retirement process and separate their twins to assure appropriate and timely medical care. I could continue on for hours with the stories, the families I've assisted, the families who the military has failed. Why does the DoD continue to fail on issues like this, whether it's housing, where we allow contractors to risk the health and well-being of our families, childcare, healthcare, or special needs children?
some pretty powerful testimony, Austin. I mean, I still feel it, and it's been 3 years, and I was just watching, and I wasn't doing it. So I was wondering, how did you feel when you were up there? How did you get selected? Like, how did this even happen?
So I was really lucky. I was a parent advisor, I guess you could call it. I'm not really sure. Childcare for Kids is an amazing coalition, and they allowed me to participate with them as a parent living the life of an EFMP family. And it was through that coalition that National Military Family Association had been asked for an EFMP family representative. And because we knew them through the coalition, they provided my name, and I believe that's ultimately how I was selected, though the internals in Congress can be confusing. I don't know if they had other names or not. I was terrified. I can tell you that I waited until the weekend before the hearing, and I'm pretty sure the hearing was on a Monday. I waited until the weekend before the hearing and worked on it for hours that night, and I hadn't done it before that. It was literally at the moment where they're saying, you have to turn this in, you have to get the testimony in. And it was because I knew how much it was going to hurt to relive everything we had been through. And I was putting it off, trying to protect myself from that pain. And getting there that day, I will say there was a lot of excitement and anticipation, right? Going in the room, seeing the line of people, that the fear slipped away for a moment until I sat down at the table. And I realized I have 5 minutes and I have to do this, and everybody's listening. And as you could tell, I was talking very quickly because I had such a short amount of time to talk, and I was worried they were going to cut me off. And I knew that I had those really important pieces at the end that, really said that it's not just my family experiencing these crazy things. And I also remember thinking, this is the worst thing that the military is ever going to have done to my family. I'm going to tell these representatives of Congress and the DOD, this is the most horrible thing that you have ever done to our family, and hope that it makes a difference. Not realizing that that wasn't going to be the worst thing that my family experienced at the hands of the Department of Defense. And I'm really happy now that I didn't know then what I've lived through now, because I don't know that I would have made it through the hearing calmly.
I'm going to drop a link in here to our media page, which does have the Nora O'Donnell CBS segment on what Austin is talking about, which was what happened to her. And I don't know if you want to go into that or not, or if we want to talk more about the hearing and maybe some of the promises that were made during the hearing.
So I can give you the short and sweet, which is my family, like many, were PCSed when medical care wasn't available. In our instance, it led to a catastrophic outcome for our child that I don't want any family to ever have to experience. So we are still working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Please feel free to view the Nora O'Donnell interview, but you don't want me sobbing talking to you guys today. And I promise you, I sobbed through the Nora O'Donnell interview, and they cut out a lot of it because it probably wasn't usable. So that's a whole nother story for another day. And Rebecca's right, you can view it. It also talks about how EFM came to be and why it's so important to my heart. So it's definitely worth a watch. There were a lot of promises made at the EFMP hearings, promises by members of Congress, promises by the DOD, but I thought maybe we could jump ahead to Congresswoman Spears and Congressman Kelly interacting with the military personnel who testified after the family and military service panel. So let's share that. 2 seconds.
Of many of the states.
To responding to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Nowicki. So At the outset, let me say this. I find the GAO report to be stinging in terms of its criticism of many of the services. And it's not good enough to come here and make happy talk about how you want to be helpful and how grateful you are for the courage of these parents to come forward and speak about their experiences. It reminds me a whole lot about the many hearings we had on sexual assault in the military and how every service official who came said they had zero tolerance for it, but it continues. So I'm telling you at the outset that we're going to be hawks on this. And we're going to have all of you come back every 3 months to give us a briefing on whether or not you have met the specific requirements that GAO has asked you to do until you get it done. Because it sounds like it's not happening. So let me start with this chart that's in our, let me ask you first this question. Have any of you read the statements of the two parents that testified today? Just raise your hands. Only two of you.
Sorry.
No, you have not. Okay, I for your homework, I would like for each of you to read their statements, because within their statements, particularly Ms. Carrigg's, are numerous vignettes about other service member families and what they have dealt with. I don't think there is a true appreciation of what these families are going through. We have another room filled with families here. We have an overflow crowd of families who came today, none of whom are testifying, but all of whom have issues with the EMFP program. So the chart we have.
So I paused here because I think that she said a lot of things that we really should talk about. One of them is that they had promised to drag them back in front of Congress every 3 months. We know that didn't happen. I think a lot of us assumed that it was because of COVID and that when the world opened up again, that promise would be kept. And it feels like maybe it's not been forgotten, but it's slid back in line of priority. So that's one of the promises that has not been kept, was forcing them to come back to the table. And we know that members of the DoD, DHA aren't always willing to come to the table. Representative Jack Carter recently tried to pull DHA into the table. There are multiple news articles out there where he invited DHA to come talk about the pharmacy changes, and DHA said, we're good, and declined to come because they weren't subpoenaed and they weren't being forced to. And I think that that's a perfect example of some of the conversations that we've had in the time since the hearing with members of Congress, which is, if you can't get them to come to the table, you imagine how much harder it is for us as families to get them to. And I think a second part that really hit me was that she knows how hard it is, right? She said, look at these families, they're all experiencing issues with the program. Even though she called it the wrong thing, we're going to forgive her because she's not military. She recognized in that moment that all of those families that came and showed up were experiencing the same thing, because let's be honest, if there weren't problems, we probably all wouldn't be standing in a line outside the door to get in.
Yeah, I also kind of, sorry, I take notes as I'm listening. But another thing that struck me was she asked them, did you all read these parent statements, before coming here, or, looking through it? And it didn't sound like, I don't know if you, since we can't see who she was talking to, did anybody say like, yeah, I read the parent statements?
So two people raised their hand. Yes, two people raised their hand, and then one said, oh, wait, I misunderstood. And it actually ended up only being one person.
Right.
And that
how
was
many
actually,
people?
I think there were 5 or 6. One of them was GAO. And I wouldn't expect GAO necessarily, right? They were just there to give updates on their report and their findings on the program. But some of the people who were there were representatives of the exact services we utilize, right? Someone from DHA was there, someone from the Army family services was there, and nobody had read them, even though we'd all been given the testimony ahead of time.
So, I mean, I can't help and I can't feel anything on Austin or anybody else's behalf that were there. But I mean, as an EFMP family member, if I had taken the time to share my family's story, the hardships that we've been through, and we're coming there to discuss the problems that this program has, you would think that you would read, okay, like prepare yourself to read the information that you're given prior to the meeting. Um, so and I felt like that was a little, I mean, I feel insulted on y'all's behalf in a way, and I know I shouldn't, that's not my place, but at the same time, it just to me, I'm like, "Okay, well, it just goes to show that, our concerns and the things that we're telling people like, 'Hey, this is a problem.'" It's kind of like, I don't wanna hear it. I don't wanna hear it. We have a program in place, it's fine." Um, so I felt like that was very telling. Um, and I mean, we go through a lot as families, so I don't know.
No, you're right. It was telling, and I I I was glad I was not in their shoes that day. You could tell that the members of Congress were really upset, and that our testimony was upsetting to them, but then to realize that nobody had bothered to read the longer testimony. So when you testify, you have an oral testimony and a written testimony, and your written testimony is almost always substantially longer. So when they're asking, did you read the written testimony? It was pages and pages longer than what I said in that 5 minutes we had to testify. So another thing to think as a family is if you are curious, you can go back and read the written testimony of all of those members with the DoD components that had to be submitted prior to the hearings, because there was a lot of information in there. I think this takes us to Congressman Kelly. We're giving you snippets because you guys don't want us to sit here and rewatch the whole 2 hours of the hearing. So give me just a second and we will pull up Congressman Kelly.
Thank you. My time's expired. Mr. Kelly.
I'm gonna do more talking than I am listening, and that's against my better judgment and what I know is not. But number one is, if it was easy or if it wasn't hard, somebody'd already be doing it. So you guys are executives. You get paid to do hard things. You get paid to make decisions that makes people's lives better. So I want to start with number one. I heard a whole lot of talking about processes. We're not talking about processes or however you correctly enunciate and pronounce that. What we're talking about is people. People. And we're talking about those very most vulnerable people that we should be helping. We shouldn't make it harder. We got to make it easier. And so I ask each and every one of you, and each and one of you should ask yourself every single day, what have I done today that made their life better? What have I done today that made those kids or family members or that soldier or that sailor, what have I done that made it better today? Because I can guarantee you, every one of you can find one simple thing every day you can do. And we're not doing that because we're talking about processes. We're not talking about people. But if it's your people, we talk about it. The second thing, and I do want to answer, just when was the last time you met with an EFMP family that you did not know? And how often do you do that? How often have you done that in the last 3 months? When's the last time you met with a EFMP family in their place and met with them and see what their issues are? And how often do you do that?
Sir, I have not personally met with an EFMP family in the last 3 months. My staff.
That's good.
Thank you.
I have met with an EFMP family about a month ago, sir.
Okay.
Sir, I have not met with an EFMP family in the last 3 months.
Sir, I have not met with an EFMP family member in the last 3 months.
Sir, I have met with an EFMP family within the last week.
I've met with families in the last week, and I talk to families every day on the phone.
And you're opted out because that's not part of your job. I have a harder question for you.
So I paused here because I think you'll find it interesting that one of those EFMP families from one of those people was us. So the EFMP family they talked to was actually my family. And I don't think that they talked to another family prior to that for a long time. And I think that that says something because I was at a place where the doors were open to me to be able to go in and talk to these people. But that doesn't mean that the doors were open to other people to be able to go in and do so. And it was really striking to me, the number of people who are like, no, haven't done it, sorry. They're never going to understand what our lives are like if they don't communicate with us and allow us to have a seat at the table.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, do they want to understand our lives? I mean, I know that's kind of a rough question, or maybe it seems harsh, but it's kind of what I do. I ask like the hard questions sometimes, and it's like, do they want to understand? Like, truly, do they want to understand? Because, you gotta wonder.
That,
You know,
and
we
then
talk about
who are our people like that do have a seat at the table, like the Special Needs Advisory Council? Like, who are they? How can we communicate with them? We still don't know that, right? We heard they stood the panel back up after the COVID pause, but we don't know who's on the panel, like as the public, and we don't know how to get feedback to them so our voices are heard.
Yeah, and I know that we've kind of heard like y'all know me, I'm not really big on providers speaking on behalf of my family and what we go through on a daily basis, even though I was a therapist and I worked with military families too in my job and stuff previously, but it's like I would never like are you getting information just straight from providers? Like, which I understand to a certain extent about their practice, but as far as my life, like all of my kids' providers know, like you don't speak on my kids' behalf and my family's behalf in that manner. So it's like where, like if they are receiving information, Rebecca, like you said, where, who's giving it to them?
well, that segues in to what Congressman Kelly says next.
No, and I don't do that. We so often get at high levels. We got to walk around. You've got to talk to the people that it's impacted, and you've got to make it personal. And if it's not personal, we're not going to get the right results because every one of these people are people, and we can all do things. You guys have amazing power in your jobs. You have amazing power. And we let all this bureaucracy make the decisions that you're allowed to make. And if you have the authority, take it and use it for good. Use it to help those families. And if you don't have the authority, you ask me and Chairwoman Spear, and I promise you, we may not get it, but we're going to bust our tail trying. That's how important this is to us. General McConville says, people first, winning matters, and Army strong. I will tell you, people first. You can't take care of people if you're not taking care of their family. And I know that General McConville agrees with that. I know at his level, winning matters. It matters to readiness that these warriors are able to go down range without worrying about what they do. So winning matters, and that means winning with their family. That means for you, in my opinion, and I won't quote General McConville, but what that means is the little things I was talking about, winning every day to make those service members' lives better. Winning every single day, even if it's a small thing, win every single day, measure winning. And the final thing is Army strong. Strong families equal a strong Army. And my dad, the smartest guy I ever knew with a high school education, used to say, we do well the things that we measure. If we don't measure, if we don't have things that show, if we're not doing what the GAO says, if we don't have our own parameters and criteria and things that we intend to make, we're not going to get better. You've got to measure it or you won't do it better. You got to be able to articulate the measurement of what makes us better. Oh my goodness, I'm just on. And let me just tell y'all a few things that I think you can do. Number one is, let's either get the authorities with TRICARE that when someone is ready to move, when they get their notification that they're moving to a PCS, they immediately get enrolled in the waiting list. Immediately. That's easy. So just tell us what you need from us to make it happen. Travel. You know, we had the thing at JBLM where they're 50 miles, but you got to get on a ferry and everything else, so we can't pay it. Holy cow, surely a two-star general or a one-star general somewhere can write that and say, you're an exception and we're going to pay your travel for this. Surely we can do that when it takes a half a day to get there and a half a day to get back, but it's not in the 50 miles. I'm sorry, I'm going to go just a little over, Jill. I'm going. BAH and separation pay, you heard me say that today. Holy cow. I mean, surely at the two-star level, we can say if a person chooses a promotion assignment and they're separated from their family, we're going to give them separation or the additional BAH. Those are easy fixes. And I think there's one more, but I'm going to leave with that. And Ms. Nowicki, if you would just tell us how to get somebody else engaged so we can, like the Marine Corps, but these school systems should be compliant. And I would really appreciate any thoughts you have after the hearing.
So I know that clip was a little bit long, but it's a lot of the things that we've been working on these past years since the hearing. I know Rebecca dropped us across the banner about the referrals. Here you go. We've been working really hard since the hearing for these specialty care referrals on PCS changes. And this last year, it wasn't something that was at the top of our list. And NMFA, I believe, and MOA championed this language, and we appreciate that. And it has passed in the 23 NDAA. That does not mean that it has gone into effect for our families. We don't know how long it's going to take to implement it, but that is a win we got from the hearing. And it only took us 3 years. So that's not actually that bad when you think about Congress and changing laws for our families. So that was really great. Another thing that he mentioned was prime travel. We've had these conversations a lot. TRICARE Prime Travel is covered if you go 100 miles or more from the location of your primary care provider, which I didn't realize. I thought it was from your home, but Rebecca shared with us it's actually from your PCM. And those families who are not going over 100 miles from their primary care provider's office don't get Prime Travel. And where he's talking about by JBLM is Gig Harbor, which it really is a ferry ride across into Seattle. I mean, we're talking hours sometimes because there is one interstate that gets you anywhere in that region. And if there's an accident, no one's moving. So that can be really hard, and it can be a long day for someone with a lot of medical issues going on. And the third thing he mentioned was separation pay and BAH if an EFMP family wants to stay behind. And that is not something that has been considered in the last 2 NDAAs that I'm aware of. But I do know that our team that works on policy has engaged with a member of Congress this year, hoping to potentially get something on the table or in the works in regards to that. So if that is something that you think would be really helpful, drop us a comment in the chat box here so that we know when we are looking at these policies, you know, we can say, oh, you know, we had one video and 7 people said that they could really utilize this one change. It would be really helpful for us. And it looks like Elizabeth says, we struggle to get our travel care covered. Our son's specialists are 3 hours away and we have to beg for weeks to get the okay to go and then months to get reimbursed. And that is something that I know we've experienced personally in TRICARE Prime Travel. I don't know if you've experienced this, Elizabeth, but they like to wait until the last day, literally the day before we travel. And sometimes even the morning of travel, we are already traveling without an approval because we can't cancel medical care. And then we'll get an email that says, yes, you can go, it's approved, even though we've been worried about it for weeks to that point. And then Carol Lee, who we mentioned earlier, we're so glad you could join us, Carol Lee, says that separation pay would be helpful for those who stay behind. And I agree with you, Carolee. I know we're getting ready for our family to have to split because my husband's going to another duty station, and it's terrifying trying to figure out how we're going to cover 2 households. And I don't know how people do it. So hands up to you because it sounds terrifying.
That was a huge conversation that we had recently. Like, I mean, y'all know about us, we were supposed to go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for battalion command, and that was a whole thing. But I knew looking at what our kids needed medical wise, we'd be going in a couple different directions. And I was like, with as often as we're going to the hospital here and where we're at now, I was like, I can't fathom that being at Fort Sill and driving to Oklahoma City maybe multiple times a week, maybe to Dallas, Fort Worth, Wichita Falls, where, I know for sure we were probably going to have to go to Houston. And so it was like a conversation that, we briefly discussed, like, do you go, if you take, like, it's like, if we go forward with this, it's like, if you go, do you stay at Fort Sill and we move back possibly to where I'm originally from in Dallas Fort Worth area. And so that was very hard to have to like possibly consider that for a career because as y'all know, I was looking at the transcript prior to this and they said in the beginning, we didn't watch the beginning of the hearing, but it said, they had mentioned how EFMP, people are afraid to enroll in EFMP because it's a career killer. And, we were a little concerned about that. I mean, that was something that kind of crossed our minds. And I just, having to maintain 2 households where a lot of EFMP families, as we know, can't work, can't be dual income families.
So I went back. I'm sorry, I was a little bit delayed. So the quote on that, Jennifer, was some family members don't enroll their family members in EFMP, even though enrollment is mandatory for active duty service members with a family member with special needs because they're concerned it will hurt their career progression. And that is something that we hear a lot in our support groups. And we hear a lot of people asking how they can get out of EFMP because the process and the program isn't working for them in the way that it was intended. So I think that we're in a really odd place, right? They're supposed to be creating standardization across the branches. And if they get it right, our families need EFMP. But if they get it wrong, the things that we've seen happen are going to continue to happen. And what we're seeing is families are either going somewhere where there's not medical care or being told they can and that there's medical care available, or it seems like there's been a trend lately, I don't know if you guys have seen it, where people are saying, we're just being denied everywhere. Every single thing that's coming up is being denied repeatedly. And so I don't know if there was a swing in that, but it seems to be a common theme among a couple of the branches lately.
I think it's medical waitlist times, and that's unfortunately affecting everybody everywhere. I mean, I've talked to some of my friends who aren't, who are civilian or aren't military, and it's like, oh my gosh, like we have to wait this long, and I'm like, sounds about right. Unfortunately, everywhere is hurting. I mean, you guys heard my saga just this past weekend of how one of my kids' main providers canceled our appointment that's coming up in March that we were waiting on to get test results from and figure out next steps for when we PCS this summer. And they were like, no, we have to reschedule you for May. And I'm like, cool. Thanks for not helping. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I know at our current children's hospital, they have a little bit of not a little bit, they have like nursing shortage as well. So
Yeah, it's hard. There is a nursing shortage across the board. If we can go back really quick to Nikki, um, saying that Eglin has an estimated 6-month wait to see a developmental pediatrician for an eval. Nikki, if you are waiting for an autism evaluation, please reach out to us because it doesn't have to be a developmental pediatrician, and our team can help you down the process and the road to get there and get the services that your kiddo needs sooner than later. Obviously, if it's for something else, there's not always that workaround, but for now, it is something that we could potentially help you with. So please reach out if it is for an autism eval. And then Elizabeth says, thank you guys for speaking on this. I hope one day it's better. I spent an hour in Lowe's, 7 months pregnant, begging TRICARE for the approval to see a specialist in Houston because my son would need life-saving surgery. I cried in Lowe's until they finally said okay, and now they make me fight for every x-ray they order every 2 years. And now we're up to move, and I'm terrified of restarting his care. Elizabeth, that speaks to my heart. I know exactly what you're going through. When I PCS'd in the horrible PCS I told you guys about at the beginning, when we found out we were coming back to where we started, we called the pediatrician and we cried because it felt like we were coming home because we had somebody on her team that we could trust. And so finding those members of your team for your kids or for yourself that you trust with your medical care and you know everything's going to be okay is hard, and it's a burden that EFMP families face every single time they PCS and they have to find a new specialist. So we are thinking of you. If there's anything we can do to help with the issues with the x-rays, sometimes they give you a denial on a technicality. And if it's something that we can easily give you something from the TRICARE operations manual on, I'm sure it would be pretty simple.
I'd like to add that we do have some data on these wait times, and we've done surveys, we've done current and previous surveys here at EFM that touches on these subjects, available on our website, and the wait times and these considerations, continue to be a persistent problem over the past few years. So I want to add that DoD did launch their own survey, which is one of the due outs from this hearing was to get feedback essentially from the services. So we hope that will, or we're, not hope, like it will continue, right? Every year they're going to ask us for how things are going within the EFMP, because it's hard for us as nonprofits, or we give them data, but the DoD wants to take their own data, right, and get their own data. So even though you may be surveyed out and you don't want to fill it out, please do. And if you don't like the questions, then put that in that comment at the end and say you shouldn't ask these questions. You should have asked different ones.
Yeah, I know my family, when we took that EFMP survey, the last box really was, how come you only asked me the pretty questions? How come you didn't ask me the questions that really mattered, right? So I would answer something and it felt like as soon as I went to go down that road, it was like, and we're changing the topic to something new. And I noticed that there were no questions for adults enrolled in EFMP. And in my household, we have children and adults enrolled in EFMP, but it felt like all of the questions were really geared more towards my children and not me. And we know that there are a lot of military spouses out there who are enrolled in EFMP. And this is something that you guys tell us all the time, which is EFMP seems to only care about children. What about me? So put that in the survey. When you take the survey, it does have to be done under the sponsor, but Office of Special Needs told us that you could do it together as a family project, and that would be acceptable. So if you don't have your invite code, you can join without one. And I know we have the survey linked for you right here in the comments. Go take it. You'll use your sponsor's DoD ID number if you are missing your invite, but they need to hear from us because this is the most important survey for our families that I think we've probably ever had. This isn't a nonprofit. This is the government, and this is your chance to have your voice heard. One of the things we did talk about that's not involved in the hearing, but I want to point out because there's been a lot of talk about travel, is that we did just do our survey report release, and we saw a lot of you saying that food insecurity was being caused by your EFMP needs. So if you are taking that survey and that applies to you, please put that in the comments as well, because we know that they're creating programs around, the new substance allowance, but it doesn't take into account EFMP families and the needs of those families and the additional costs that we don't always get to choose, right? When we are talking about JBLM or these 2-hour drives, if you were choosing where to live, you probably aren't going to choose to live 2 hours from the nearest hospital. But when the military chooses, you live where they tell you, and you are driving these extra hours, and it is costing you more money. And we did hear from you that some of these expenses are leading to food insecurity. So please put that in your EFMP survey, even though it may not feel like it's tied together. The responses in our survey showed that it was. And we can pivot back now to the promises that were made. I know that we've had a post go out this morning. I'm not sure, Rebecca, has our statement position gone out yet on social media, or will that be this evening?
It has. So, and I will
Okay.
put that in the comments, and we have, answered some of those updates in here as we've talked, but there's a few that we really haven't touched on. And one of them is, so the GAO 2020 follow-up of the 2018 EFMP report highlighted limited progress. So this was discussed as we highlighted in the hearing. And Congress requested each service provide an update on the report via briefing every 3 months. I don't know if any briefings have happened. We're not privy to that. However, there was a report that was published, and I'm going to link it here in the comments. And we're part of the EFMP coalition, and we sent a response on this report in December of last year to the Office of Special Needs, and we're awaiting a reply. You can contact the EFMP coalition if you wanted that email there, but basically the report we felt had left a lot of questions for us. So we basically compiled all those questions amongst all the organizations in the coalition, which did include the other person that testified on this day 3 years ago, Michelle Norman, who founded Partners in Promise. And they focus on special education for military families. But so we got all of our heads together, and we put in our list and submitted it. So this may be part of the response to this. I'd be interested to find out if there was actually a briefing every 3 months or not, or if those will resume post-COVID. I don't know if you have any comments. Do you guys have any comments on that? I can go the next one. The next one was there was a lot of talk in the hearing about inequities, right, across the services. And I'll just give you an example of what was said in the hearing. So the U.S. Marine Corps is a small service and has, at this time in 2020, had 107 full-time equivalent family support staff. The Army is the largest service and has 119. So, that's just one of the inequities. And Congress requested essentially answers to the inequities within each services program, and asked for a standardization across the board. And found this very interesting because I came from a dual military family, and I saw this with branch of service respite. And basically, I was Air Force. My husband is still Army, active duty Army, and for the branch of service respite for the Air Force at the time, it was 40 hours a month, and it included sibling care. And all of a sudden, we transitioned out. I transitioned out of the Air Force, and I'm applying for Army service respite. And it was 25 hours a month, and it didn't cover sibling care. And it was a lot harder to get into. and across the board, there's provider onboarding issues. But what I'd like to say, I think one of the responses to standardization is we are waiting release on a new DOTI for EFMP. I don't know when that is going to come out, but I think it should come out this year. And hopefully it'll address some of these standardization issues across the services. And in my mind, this should go for assignments too, right? So if you're going to a joint base and your child has a diagnosis of Down syndrome with a cardiologist as a specialist, if you're Air Force or Army, the answer should be the same on whether you can go there or not, right? At the same time, right? Because I know wait lists do differ, but sometimes there can be different answers for different services, and that makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense. So, one of the other things. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Rebecca, you mentioned the DOTI. I know that we know what a DOTI is, but can you tell everybody who is watching who maybe doesn't know why this DOTI is so important and what it is?
It outlines the overall DoD policy. So it talks about respite. It talks about all those things that we discussed. And really, if you have to standardize something across the branches, you need a DoD instruction, so Department of Defense instruction to provide guidance on standardization. And then each branch will have their own policies written, usually that supplement it. But the current DoD instruction, I did link in the comments so you could look over it, but hopefully the new one will address some of the standardization issues. Good point. One of the other do-outs from this hearing was town hall schedules. So, there's supposed to be town hall schedules for each service. And, we know that COVID hit. However, one of the really positive things that came out of COVID was the ability to meet virtually, and everybody's kind of buy-in on that. So is there a town hall schedule? Virtual meetings often work best for our families as well, because we have a lot of commitments when it comes to medical appointments. So that's something that we would like to have an answer on.
Right. And so I know I've seen a couple, maybe 3 town halls that have happened, and we do appreciate those. But I think what I feel like I've seen a lot lately are leaders are going to meet with a select group of families. And although we are appreciative that they're meeting with families, it comes back to how are they selecting this group of families, right? It's not necessarily the people who need a seat at the table. I'm not saying that they don't deserve it. What I'm saying is that it should be an open forum for all families enrolled in EFMP to be able to come forward and talk to their leadership, because what my family experiences for our EFMP needs is different than Jennifer or even Rebecca. And if only one of us were invited, then you're missing a third of just right here our experiences within the program. So yes, we see leaders out there and we know they're trying, we know they're meeting with people, but I think it takes us back to we need a seat at the table. And the only way that you're going to give us a seat at the table is if you invite everybody to the table. Don't select and choose who you actually want to hear from. Take the time to meet with all of us, even if it's in a really controlled way, like the town halls we've talked about. And I will say Fort Bragg's, theirs wasn't horrible. They answered a lot of questions. And I just say Bragg because it's so big, right? There are so many families there. You would have thought if there's going to be a base with a lot of chaos, it's going to be a big one like Bragg, where we know there's a lot of EFMP families, but I didn't see any riots breaking out. So it's definitely doable and possible. And we would encourage the military and Congress to look at those town halls and really consider how they're inviting EFMP families and why they're being selective in the ones that they do choose. Sorry, Rebecca.
We watched the Fort Bragg one. We were able to watch it on, I think, Facebook Live or something like that. So that was kind of helpful. It was nice to be able to peek in.
No, I agree.
Right, and
And
you're not even
I like the Air Force Central Cell where they post their video updates too. I wish all the services did that, or had some sort of online interaction. Because I mean, the Air Force will respond to you if you message them on Facebook, which is great. So it would be nice if all the services had something like that where they're constantly feeding information in a easy way for us to find that maybe goes beyond just an email to the service member, because sometimes that information doesn't make it from the service member to the family members, and the family members are often the primary caregivers.
Well, and I know like us as EFM, like we go live a lot. We give families updates constantly on what's going on and everything. And essentially, I feel sometimes like we're doing the DoD's job, which is not unheard of because how many, raise your hand if you've had to research a duty station to ensure that your family can go there and research it more so than like, oh yeah, the army or so and so approved for you to go there. And it's like, okay, well, what's available? I don't know. Like, uh, figure it out. Like we figure it out. And so we provide a lot of information. EFM does for a lot for our families, which I think is fantastic because we're in it as well. We're not just some employee or whatever that doesn't understand completely, but at the same time, I know that we're all kind of like, just do your job, just help us. That's all we're asking. And because in the beginning of the hearing, it said EFMP, like I think it was Congressman Kelly, he was like EFMP is about readiness. It's also about retention. And right now we have an issue with recruiting and retention. And if you want to hit all three of those, you help us. You help our EFMP families. You help us. Because I know my husband, I mean, he likes his job. And it's like you said, Austin, in your testimony, I mean, about your husband. And so I'm sure there's a lot of service members that are like, yeah, I want to stay in, but why is this so difficult to do? So sorry. I'm going to end my rant now.
It's so true.
No,
Yeah, and I think people echoed that. We have somebody here that disagrees. So how is it that DoD's job to research resources for our families? They are our families. What they should be doing is making sure that TRICARE has a wealth of providers in every area that a base is. Okay, that is
so
a good
yes,
point.
it is, but one thing to think about is that TRICARE is DoD. So the TRICARE policy falls under, this big umbrella. It's all tied together. So when you go to your MTF and you're talking about EFMP, it's all tied together. It's all commingled. And so when we're talking about the DoD in this instance, we're talking about when you're PCSing and there's a military treatment facility and they're saying, oh, yes, we have a provider at the MTF who can see your child. And I can tell you, we're in the DC area. And up until very recently, they did not have a pediatric dermatologist at any of the military treatment facilities in the region. And I think there's 6. And they were just having pediatric patients see the adult dermatologists. And this is where it's DoD's job as well as these TRICARE policies, because some of our care is within the military treatment facilities, some of our care is not. And it is the military treatment facilities who are making the decisions on yes, medical care is available or no, it's not. So there are massive issues that are wrong with TRICARE. We all know that, right? Like how many times have you gone to the website and you've searched for a provider and you've called 30 and one provider died, another doesn't take TRICARE, they're not in business anymore, it's not the right phone number. We know those issues exist, but this also goes back to the MTF saying that medical care is available. And one of the things we've asked multiple times and will continue to ask is that when they do these queries and determine if your family can go to a new duty station, that they create a record of some sort that they can hand off to the family. We know the Marine Corps does that. If you're actually searching to find medical care for this EFMP beneficiary, it's only going to take you a couple more minutes to write down the names of the places that you found that could take them without a wait list. And we've asked that that be placed in their medical record because EFMP, when they do the query, have to open your medical record to verify that care is available. So they could put a note in there that you could potentially access through MHS Genesis or TRICARE Online that would make this PCS process easier, or at least give you a place to start. And so that's how it's kind of tied together with it being DOD's job and the TRICARE contracts being a mess because it all overlaps quite a bit.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll
Never
add
thought
that
I'd
it can
defend
be,
them, but
yeah,
Oh.
it can be frustrating for families to,
Yeah.
and I'll just use myself as an example, right? So I know that I agree with you, Anna, about, you know, I have to do my own research to a certain extent. But then when I'm pointed to entities within the government that are supposed to aid me in that search, and I hit, you know, walls like, you know, oh, well, go to the SLO. They're the education expert and they'll be able to tell you. And I go to the SLO and they're like, well, I don't know anything about special education. Sorry. And then I walk out the door. You know, I go to the coordinator or the navigator. It depends on what they're called and with the different services. But I go to the EFMP office in the family support side of the house. And I fill out a form and I say I need help and assistance in moving and finding resources, and I never get a response back. I'm not saying that that is the case for everybody, right? Some people have amazing navigators and coordinators that help them. But there are people hired by the DoD that it is their job to help us find these resources. So that's where some of the frustration lies, you know?
Yeah, and I've also had an experience, I mean, recently with the battalion command situation where it was like I called the EFMP like the incoming EFMP office, I guess that's the correct verbiage, I have no idea. At saying, "Hey, we're heading there." And they were like, "Who are you? We didn't approve for you to come here. We don't know who you are." And I was like, interesting, because Army said we were approved, and it was not the case. And so, yeah, it was a lot of, like, having to so then it was like because it was a battalion command situation, it was like I had to research, like, how many different bases do y'all remember? Like 5 or 6 different bases to say, like, we can't go here. Like, we can't go here because of our kids' needs and stuff like that. And so it's hard, you know, and yeah, I don't know, but yeah, it does seem like EFMP works so separately than TRICARE, and oh, I should probably put myself on mute.
so there is a process. There is something called an EFMP family needs assessment. Once upon a time, they were directed by Congress to fill these out for military families pre-PCS. Families didn't know about it, and guess what? They didn't get filled out. And because they didn't get filled out, they went back to Congress and said, families aren't asking for these. They don't need these. We shouldn't have this requirement that we provide them. And so now it's no longer a statutory requirement to do them. But these family needs assessments are how you force them to do their jobs. So this is going to be at your family support center. This is not at your MTF. The link here will take you to a Military One Source. I know how much many of you are probably rolling your eyes, but the Military One Source website, there's a link where you can find your local family support center. They are supposed to fill this form out with you. I have filled it out for my family during a PCS. And when you go through the form, it says, what are you concerned about? And this is when you say, I'm concerned because I can't find this specialist at this installation or this specialty school. And then they are supposed to help you find those resources. Not only that, this family needs assessment has to be sent to the gaining installation family support office. And because so few of them are done, not many are actually sent, which means when they get them, they tend to respond to them because you're one of the few families they know are going to be knocking on their door saying, I know you got this document because I hunted someone down to get it done. So this is your way to hold their feet to the fire and find accountability, because if they come back after you filled this out and they're like, we still can't find anywhere that doesn't have a 6-month wait list, you can say, here's my documentation and my proof that this duty station that you're trying to PCS us to is not appropriate for my family member. It's not just your word against theirs. Now you have a DoD form that supports what you're saying that has been filled out by a DoD employee.
Yes, and I think that's a good to bring us back to the hearing, they did say they asked for the services to have quarterly contacts, right, with the EFMP families. Is that happening? Is there a mechanism to do that? If it's the family needs assessment as part of that mechanism when somebody leaves or PCSs, what are the wickets to make sure that the family gets that document? And I don't know, maybe this will be covered in the new DoD instruction, but in our support groups, we hear a lot of, sometimes when people are really happy, though, I'll be honest, they don't say anything, right? So the people who are getting regular contacts are probably just really quiet. I don't know. But we do hear a lot of people that aren't hearing from their EFMP offices. So, where's the checks and balances for that?
So I guess the question I have then is, Rebecca, Jennifer, everybody who's watching and participating, have you heard from your EFMP case manager or liaison at your community service in the last 3 months? No. I called mine, so I guess that counts, right? I hunted someone down and said I need help, but I hadn't heard from them in a year. So let us know. Oh, Elizabeth says, nope, she hasn't. Oh, Nikki says she has heard from somebody. So now we say 1/5 of us have had somebody reach out in the last 3 months. Oh, Anna says, only because my daughter needs to go out of treatment for 100 miles.
I'm gonna be honest. I'll have questions for all of y'all about that because we're moving to Austin this summer, and I think when my son will be receiving care in Houston, I got to do the math. But like TRICARE, Prime Travel, I'll have questions for all of y'all. So all of you that are talking about Prime Travel, don't be shocked if you see me asking like, "Hey, I have a million questions. Can you please answer them for
Maybe
me?"
we can do a live on that and discuss TRICARE Prime Travel. It's a great topic. So Tracy says she's not heard from anybody in the last 2 years. Nikki, I think my question for you is, they called to let you know that assessments were due. So was that the hospital EFMP that was calling to let you know, or was that your community service option? Because those are 2 different offices, and your community service is who would be handling your respite care. That's Navy respite care, Air Force, Army respite care, which is different than the TRICARE respite care. They're the people who would be providing you contacts to services in your local area, helping you sign up for Medicaid waivers. So it's going to be completely different than the people at the hospital, just so you know. Sandy says, my kids and I are in EFMP. I could use advice. We're in orders from Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and we are told there are no pharmacies for the military in the area. We have to pay for our medicine through Express Scripts or copay at Walgreens. With over 20 prescriptions, the cost will be too much for us to afford. What can we do? So, Rebecca,
I would like.
You've been
training.
You've been training for this.
You are right about the pharmacy here. The only one, I'm at Fort McCoy right now, and or we're at Fort McCoy. I'll add to that I didn't realize this before we moved, that the Mayo Clinic is just under 100 miles. I'm laughing because what else can I do? It's just under 100 miles, so I get denied for everything that I have to go to Rochester. And it's about an hour and a half away. But anyways, I would like to talk to you one-on-one about the pharmacy issue. If you could please shoot me an email. I'm going to drop my email into the chat because I would like to elevate your specific issue. But you're right. The only pharmacy here right now, because there's no MTF, the only pharmacy here is Walgreens. That's it. So.
And I know the hearing, obviously, it didn't address, I didn't hear pharmacy, and I didn't read any pharmacy, any of in the transcripts or anything like that. But now, fast forward to 2023, here we are, we're on a spot where, again, if they were meeting every couple months and getting these reports, maybe somebody would be able to give them a heads up, hey, these pharmacy cuts, they're not as simple as they seem. They're affecting a lot of people. You know, they just are. I mean, our MTF is we're fortunate. It's close by, but the way our pharmacy is run on base, it's v it it's just frustrating, and at the time, it was very complicated, and so I scooted everything to Walgreens, and now I can't tell you how many times especially right before everybody was put or as everybody's getting pushed to Express Scripts, how many times I showed up and I was like, "Hey, I need to pick up my kids' inhalers," and they're like, it's gonna be like 200 bucks. Here you go, you know, whatever." And I'm like, "What?" So I think if we can start trying to push picking up, you know, meeting every 3 months and stuff like that, they would have foreseen this happening, being a problem for EFMP families.
Right, and if I can add to the pharmacy really quick, I promise to make it short. I know we've been here a long time, but many of you don't realize we're in a new contract with a new pharmacy contractor. So just like we have TRICARE, we have a new pharmacy contractor, and this new pharmacy contractor, as of January 2023, has changed the way a lot of medications are filled. So if you are PCSing and you're going to be in the situation that Sandy's finding herself in, getting your medications from a civilian pharmacy, please go on the Express Scripts TRICARE website and check to see what your copays are and check to see if there's a prior authorization form required, because they have implemented large changes for step therapy, which means if you're on a medication prior to this, even if you're getting it from your MTF, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to continue on that medication without having tried other medications first. And that we are seeing a lot of families say is causing issues. It'll also help you when you're looking at what your copay should be. So I know that my little girl's on a lot of medications too. And when we were at a base that there was not an MTF nearby, we would go to pick it up from Walgreens and they would say $72 this month. But then like last month it was 40 and they'd say, yes, we ran your insurance. This is what it was supposed to be. I could never figure out why. The Express Scripts website shows you what your copay should be for the medication. It also will tell you what's happening with situations like Jennifer, where you can get 2 or 3 fills from a civilian pharmacy before you're required to transfer it to Express Scripts or have that copay go up substantially. So there's so much chaos happening. We couldn't fully explain it all, but you need to go on that Express Scripts website and look at how much you're paying for your medications and what your expected copays are. And I can't believe I'm going to give someone a point out here, but GoodRx sometimes is actually cheaper than my copay. So get a GoodRx card. It's free. You can go on their website and see where it's cheapest and then make the decision on whether you're going to bill TRICARE or use that discount card, because I think we have 4 medications that if we use the GoodRx discount card, it's actually cheaper than our TRICARE copay.
I've done that
Crazy
for
world we're
myself for
living in.
antibiotics. I've done that for myself for antibiotics. And actually, like, sometimes our pharmacists at Walgreens, like the pharmacy techs, they'll be like, "Hey, can we check GoodRx for you?" And I'm like, "Yes, feel free, please do." So,
yes, GoodRx is great. If you're an adult on EFMP, Amazon just opened a prescription program. It's like $5 a month to join the prescription program, and you get your month's supply of medications. It's generic meds, but they're some of the old school ones that a lot of people are on. $5 a month. They don't serve certain states. I'm in Maryland. They don't serve Maryland, but they serve a majority of the states, and it's like $5 for the entire month for all of the medications that you can get through them. So that could be really cost saving if you're in one of these situations too.
And some of the people on here are saying, you know, how can I join the fight? Well, for the TRICARE cuts, the pharmacy cuts, we have a petition with TRICARE for Kids, and TRICARE for Kids is looking for stories on this, so we can get you in front of the right person to share your story. And we are fighting these changes. And then some other people said they want to just help in general. I dropped a link to joining our team if you're interested. We're an all volunteer force made up of EFMP family members. So we're really, really flexible with ours because our lives are very chaotic, but we're welcome to anybody that wants to join our team to help fight that. But
yes,
so
and we are
think
hopefully
we're-
going. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, and hopefully soon we are going to start doing some like Zoom sessions, like volunteer inquiry sessions for people who might be interested in like dipping their toe into volunteering with EFM, where it's like you meet with a couple of us and ask questions and inquire about like what volunteering, like what it entails with EFM and stuff like that, like what that all entails. Because yes, come help us. So
Yes. Okay. Well, I think this brings us to the end. And I don't know about you guys. I cried just a little bit in the beginning. Maybe you didn't see, but it was an emotional day for me. And I really appreciate everybody who showed up, everybody who's come along now, and all of our families at EFM. We wouldn't be EFM without all of the families who come to us for help and who share their stories with us, because that's what makes us so powerful, is that we're sharing the stories of families just like ours. So thank you so much. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We will drop a few more links in the comments to this post in the next couple of hours. One will be about pharmacy. We'll drop you a link for our advocacy support groups. And we will be back live soon, I promise. So have a good weekend.